She had to have been in a deep sorry type of feeling. Now I want to share Addie and I's full testimony about our journey for the past 3.5 years. Addie and I got married January 29, 2022. Could have happened 18 months sooner. We decided we wanted to start and try to have a baby shortly after we got married. We were both ready to start a family of our own. Well, a couple weeks and a month and a half later, Addie had to have back surgery. She had to repair a herniated disc. So that put a hold on our plans for about 3 months. So in June of that year, we started our journey back up trying to have a baby. Well, mid-July comes, we run into another problem. Addie's body is not cooperating like a woman's body should. We started to go see an OBGYN to help try and figure out what was wrong. So at first, the doctor assumed it was just the result from the back surgery that she had, and that her body was still healing and recovering from it. But after the next few trips, we were told it could be a hormone imbalance. We needed to change the diet, cut out certain things. So we tried. We did. We started doing what the doctor recommended, and this happened for the rest of 2022. So 2023 rolls around. We're still trying to figure out what the issue is, so we're discussing with each other if we needed to go see a fertility doctor. We discussed this also with the doctor that we were currently seeing, except we kept getting told to wait and see if the next procedure would work, or if the next blood work results were going back to normal levels. Nothing changed. So towards the end of 2023, we were losing our patience with that doctor. We felt like we're wasting our time. So now this is the part where Addie and I started to seriously question if it was a possibility that we were never going to have a baby. We weren't getting the results with the pregnancy tests that we wanted, so fear and doubt started to creep its way in. So at first, when that started happening, I was still real optimistic about seeing the positive test or positive result on a test form. Addie wasn't. She felt like she was failing as a wife. She felt like she couldn't give me the one thing that she felt was part of a woman's duty in a marriage, of giving her husband a child. Such discouragement started taking over. Being told constantly to change your diet. You need to change this. You need to change that. You got to start doing this different. You got to start doing that different. Etc., etc. It added even more stress on her mental state that she became depressed. I, as a husband, recognized it at first. Tried everything in my power to help her, keep her from that mindset. But as the year kept rolling, I started becoming more depressed. And I started becoming bitter, angry, resentful towards the people that were getting the result that we were praying for. Not necessarily to their face, but behind the scenes. I became very, very angry, but nobody knew that. I was getting this way, not even happy. Now, I want you to, if you just heard me from my perspective, I want you to hear Addie's. I want you to hear the things that she would ask me, the things that she would say to me, and ultimately the most fearful statement that I ever questioned, I ever heard her ask me, Addie.
So when it came to this point in our journey, it, like what he said, I was very mentally drained, getting very depressed. Not a lot of people knew that. I would come up on stage, sing, put a smile on my face, but deep down I felt like I was a failure as a wife. I know a lot of women don't think that way nowadays, but to me, number one job is to create a family with your spouse, to multiply and have children. And when you can't give that one thing to your husband, or you can't do that one thing, you feel as a failure. And you sit there and you ask God, why? This is my one job. My one purpose in life as a wife is to have kids and be a mom and make my husband a dad and all this other stuff, but I can't do it. Why won't you grant me this? And it was very frustrating. And so I would always ask him, why aren't you as frustrated as I am? And it would make me even more frustrated that he wasn't as frustrated as I am. But that's just how we are. But in my head, I'm like, I want him to be as frustrated as me. I want him to show me that he's as frustrated as me. But I know as a husband, you know, sometimes they have to level out the wives and what we're thinking and our emotions and everything. But with that, I just would constantly ask him, why aren't you frustrated as me? I want you to be as frustrated as me. I feel like I'm being a failure to you. And then I started being fearful. And I'm like, am I doing right by you? Do you think I'm doing right by you? And I started worrying, is he going to leave me? Is he going to divorce me because I'm not going to give him the one thing that a husband would really want as a child? And I started being fearful with that. And I'm going to let him finish the rest of his message, but I know coming from a woman's perspective, a lot of women don't voice those feelings, don't voice those with their husband and everything, but I think women should, because your husband is your support system, and no matter what you're going through, he's supposed to be there for you, and you are supposed to be there for him. So no matter what you're going through, always voice your stuff with your husband, that way he can fight with you.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the things that she would say to me. Those are the types of statements that she would make. And it would constantly be in an emotional setting. Both of us would be crying. I would never leave my wife. Ever. I would tell her, it don't matter if we never had a kid. I would never leave my wife because of that. That is not grounds to do that. There's nothing that she could do to me, or I could do to her, that we would ever leave each other. Because that is not what marriage is about. I would answer these questions. I am, but I can't show it or I can't express it because you are. If both of us are depressed or angry, it won't be good for our marriage. I'm just as frustrated, but I have to be the strong one for you and try and stay positive for us. That was our constant lifestyle for 2023. Being told what not to do and being told what to do. This was when we weren't really starting to put our trust in God's hands anymore. We started to trust more in the science. So 2024, at the beginning, was when we were told we would have to try and find a fertility doctor or a specialist if we wanted to get pregnant. We cannot get pregnant on our own without help, is what we were told. We kept trying to have a baby during this whole process, but still getting the same negative result. The fear and doubt had made a home in our life. We couldn't get in to see a fertility specialist until August of 2024. Up to that point, although we were still trying, the negative results kept weighing even heavier on our faith in the Lord. More so myself than with her. Addie was ready to be done with trying, and she started to accept that the tests were negative before the results even showed. She would say, "What's the point anymore? I already know it's a negative." I, on the other hand, accepted the fact that I was never going to be able to have a child. I became content with that thought. So as 2024 kept going, more negative and hurtful results kept rushing in. Constant attacks on Addie mentally was also not helping the situation. I started becoming angry with that happening. I would tell Addie, "You need to address that or I'm going to take care of it." And it started to cause arguments between the two of us to where we would cause each other more stress. I became so bitter that I started to question God if he was even with me anymore. I was ready to completely give up on my faith. I was ready to be done with church. I was ready to move away. I was wanting to get away from everybody. I didn't want to be around anybody anymore. I contemplated within my own mind, what was the point of anything anymore? At this stage in my life, I never felt this before in my life at all. I never felt that feeling. I didn't know how to handle it. So August 2024 comes, we're finally able to get seen by our fertility doctor. So August through September, the specialist told us to try and get pregnant on our own with the help of an injection. More negative results happened. So October through November, we got told we needed to take it up a notch and go to the next stage, which is an IUI. I'm not going into detail what an IUI is. Okay, it's just the next stage of the fertility process. But during those couple months, more negative results happened. Thanksgiving, November 2024. We took a test that morning. Negative result. And I remember we were at Brad and Steph's house for Thanksgiving, because that's what we've been doing every year. And I remember Addie was in the kitchen. I'm on the couch. I get a text in our big Brosier family group chat at 12:30. Our Thanksgiving don't start till 1 o'clock. I get a text at 12:30. Trinity and Anthony are pregnant. I took Addie's phone and I hid that from her all day long. I was so angry. Not at Trinity or Anthony. I could never be mad at them. But I was mad and angry at the situation because we are seeing more people get the result that we are desiring and praying for. I didn't hardly say 5 words to anybody that year at Christmas. Looking back on it, I regret that. But this is where I was at, and this is how I was feeling. I remember Addie asking me later, or telling me later that everybody's been asking her if I was okay. And she even asked, "What is going on? What is your problem? What's the matter?" I would tell her, I was like, "Nothing, I'll tell you later. Don't worry about it." So as we're leaving that night, Brad and Steph have like a 500-foot driveway. So as we left, before we got halfway down the driveway, I told Addie what happened. And I broke down. And I was crying uncontrollably. I had to stop the car, obviously. This was the first time that I broke down during the last couple of years. I kept everything in. Addie didn't know a whole lot was going on. She didn't know anything how I was feeling until just a few days ago. I never told her. And I remember telling Addie as I'm driving down the driveway, this one got me. This one hurt. And I explained to her, Trinity is the youngest of us grandkids, and I'm the oldest, and I'm the only one that does not have a kid. So you can imagine my feeling in this. Now at the time, I didn't even think of what kind of statement that could do to Addie mentally. Remember, she was already feeling like a failure by not being able to give me a child. And the one thing that I really wanted. So I can tell you that made things worse for Addie mentally, even though she never told me that it did. I knew later on that statement made her feel worse. So now for the next 2 weeks, I didn't tell anybody, not even Addie, how I was feeling. That feeling of bitterness and anger became even more daunting in my mind. I started to give up on my prayer about having a child. I questioned God even more. I would say things to him and ask him things like, "God, what is the point of you having me and Addie go through this if you aren't ever going to bring us out? What is the point of going through this storm if you aren't going to answer me?" December 11th, this was a Wednesday night. I remember there were some people up here at the altar praying, getting some prayer. And I remember leaning over to Addie, we were sitting right here. I remember leaning over to her and asking her if she felt like we needed to come up and get prayer again. We have asked for prayer about this multiple times during the last couple of years prior to this. But for some reason, this one felt a little different. So we decided to come up and get prayer again. And I told Pastor Nate before we prayed that we wanted a child so bad, and we've had more negative news just days before this day happened, that we had to make a decision on doing IVF. And I started crying and telling him that I felt like my faith in the Lord is gone, and that I'm losing my faith completely. Pastor Nate said something to me that I'll never ever forget. He said, "No, Tyler, your faith is rising. The thing that you have been praying for will come to pass as long as you keep your eyes on the Lord. You don't ever have to understand why you will ever go through this storm when you come out, and that's okay." After we got prayer that night, Addie and I felt better than we did in months. But that feeling lasted about a week and a half. Because December 21st, 2024 comes around. We had our big brother Christmas here at the church. I remember seeing my cousins walk through the back door and their kids walk in, and their kids had on Big Brother, Big Sister t-shirts. Addie and I kind of noticed it, and we kind of gave each other a look like, "Do you see that?" And I remember Addie asking me, "Are Josh and Holly and Derek and Bree pregnant?" I was like, I don't know. I was like, they could just have on t-shirts for Big Brother, Big Sister. The thing is, their youngest kids had on Big Brother, Big Sister t-shirts, and I didn't put two and two together. So nobody noticed in the family, nobody noticed this for over an hour. And I remember that when it got noticed, we found out they were both pregnant. Addie looked at me and said, "Hey, I'm going to the bathroom." She ended up being in there for 45 minutes to an hour, just crying, sobbing back there. And I went and checked on her because she was gone for about 10, 15 minutes, and I knew why. I remember I went back there and checked on her and asked her if she was okay, and she's like, "Oh, I'm fine. I just need to be alone." So I remember coming back in, and I sat back in my chair. And I was sitting at one of the tables back there, and I was sitting diagonal from Pastor Nate. And he looked at me, and he said, "Your guys' time is coming." And I just looked at him, and I was like, "Mm-hmm." Just kind of gave him one of those little nods and half a smirk. I started to allow that discouragement and doubt and fear take control again. And for the next 30 minutes, I sat there by myself, and I didn't say a word to anybody. And for the first time, and what felt like forever, God spoke to me. He asked me, "Why are you so bitter towards them? Why are you doubting me? Do you not trust me anymore?" And from that very second, I made a decision to not allow fear and doubt and discouragement take any more control in our life. I got up and I went and congratulated all of them on being pregnant. And this was over 45 minutes later. And as I was talking to my cousin Derek, my sister-in-law, Kyrie, came. She gave me a hug and she asked if I was okay. I told her I was, but I asked her if she could go back and check on Addie because Addie was still in the back crying. She told me that she would. But before she did, she said something to me that will stick with me until the day I die. And it is also the reason why I titled this message, Joy in the Journey. She said, "This is going to be the toughest thing that you and Addie have to do in this whole process. But if you don't find joy and happiness for other people, getting the result that you've been praying for, you aren't going to see that result. If you don't find joy in the journey, you're going to be bitter forever. That statement right there burned itself into my mind. So leaving that day and going home, Addie and I had a talk. We needed to start shifting our mindset from a negative one to a positive one. We needed to start looking towards what kind of testimony that was going to come out of this, rather than focusing on the storm and the distractions itself. We started to change how we prayed over the pregnancy tests. We started to tell each other and keep each other accountable about being happy for people getting pregnant. And that was the hardest thing that we ever had to do. Other than the result itself, that was the most rewarding that we got out of this whole process. December 30th, I posted something on social media and I said that 2025 was the year that I refused to let myself and my family believe the negative reports anymore. I'm claiming 2025 in the name of Jesus that this year we will see God do the miraculous. Let go and let God. And for the next 3 to 4 days, I heard the Lord in an audible voice say to me. Now, when I say audible voice, I'm going to clarify this. I was at work when I heard this. I thought my buddy behind me was talking to me. And he wasn't. He had headphones in. He's not talking to me. And so that's when I'm realizing the Lord is getting my attention. The Lord said to me, and he said this statement, "You've trusted me this far, but with doctors and signs to help. If you take a break and you take a step back and put your 100% faith and trust in me, I will take care of it." And I said, okay. So I told Addie this and told her we needed to take a break to relieve stress off our bodies and our mind, and we just needed to trust God again. So 2025, January 11th, comes around and it's decision time. We got to make a decision on whether or not we want to do IVF. And we told the doctor IVF for us is a one-shot deal. And we asked what kind of percentage that it is a positive 50-50 shot. So me and Addie discussed it, and we were like, let's just take a break. Like, we're going to take a break. We're going to tell her we're going to take a break. So January 11th, we had a virtual consultation with the doctor, and we told her that we wanted to take a break. And if we didn't end up getting pregnant in the next 3 to 4 months, we'd come back and we would do IVF. Now this is going to be a little weird probably, all right? But January 19th, and the reason why I'm putting this in there because it doesn't make sense how we got pregnant. January 19th was the last time Addie and I were intimate until the next month because of time schedules that we were told to do from the doctor. And the doctor told us that sperm can only live in a woman's body up to 7 days. So this is January 19th. Remember, 7 days. My God. March 2nd, 2025. 6 in the morning. Addie took a test. She prayed before looking at the result. She pulled the test out. She took the test, she put the test back in the wrapper, and then she prayed over it. She pulled the test back out and she flipped it over and looked at the result. It was positive. She stood there for probably about 5 minutes before realizing to come and get me and wake me up and tell me. And so I remember, this is 6 in the morning on a Sunday morning. I'm fully asleep. Okay, she's up getting ready for church, and she's screaming at the top of her lungs. And I'm like, slowly waking up. And so I remember she goes, honey, wake up, it's positive. And I'm like, what? And I'm still waking up. She goes, honey, it's positive. And before I could even roll over and get out of bed, I am sobbing, crying uncontrollably. And we took 2 more tests that day because we had never seen a positive test before. We were so excited, we ended up telling everybody that day and the next day. Now, we originally wanted to wait a few weeks or a couple months to tell anybody. I'm to blame for that. Because I originally, like I said, we originally wanted to wait and tell people, but I couldn't keep it a secret. We went to the doctor a few days later to confirm that we were pregnant, and yes, we were pregnant. But the science and the math don't add up. We were told on March 5th that we were 4 weeks pregnant. 4 weeks from that was February 5th. Now you remember the 7 days that we were told. February 5th was 2.5 weeks later. After the last time anything happened between Addie and I. So make it make sense. Make it make sense. You can't. We don't understand how that child is here, according to math and science. So fast forward to May, we're finding out we're having a baby girl. So obviously our lives are completely changing. And as the months flew by fast and October comes, we're finding out that she's in the lower percentile and we're going to possibly have to deliver at 37 to 38 weeks. And on October 29th, our 38-week delivery date to the day, the delivery happened. Addie went to full labor and was ready to start pushing around 11:10 p.m. And she pushed twice, and the baby's head was out. And I remember the doctor that came up and told us that the baby was arched around the bone. Addie needed to push because this baby had to come out. And I've never experienced anything like this in my life. And I'm not talking about her being born. I remember my mom and my mother-in-law, they were in the room with us. And I remember them putting their hands on my back and they began to pray because of what the doctor just told us. Now where I was positioned at in the room, because the baby was coming so quickly, I was helping Addie focus on the breathing. Okay, so I'm up towards the top of the bed and I've got my arm wrapped around her head and I'm holding her hand. And so then there's 2 nurses here and then the 2 male doctors that deliver the baby. Everybody else in this room were women. Okay? And I remember as I'm there, and they began to pray. For some reason, where I'm at, I looked up and I looked to my left. The 2 men that were in the room, one was a black man, the other was an Asian man. This man that I seen was neither one. There was a 3rd man in that room. And I confirmed this with my mom and my mother-in-law. They never remember a 3rd man in that room.
Well.
And I looked up and I looked to my left. And there's a man standing. There's a man standing here. He had a full beard. And he's just standing there smiling. And at 11:21, our little blessing baby was born. I, of course, instantly burst into tears. I started to just thank God for bringing us out of the storm. As the next couple of days happen, I'm sitting there holding my child. There's no denying that this child is mine. She looks exactly like her daddy. Yeah. I'm hoping she grows up and looks like her mama. Next couple days go by, I start to try and process this, who I saw in the room. And like I said, I called both of our moms, and they confirmed they don't ever remember seeing a third man out. That's when I realized that I saw the Lord standing there in that room. And in that instant, I remembered what the Lord said to me at the beginning of the year about putting my whole faith and trust in Him and that He was going to take care of it. And I just started weeping, just thanking Him while I'm holding my daughter. We decided to name her Evelina because we wanted to have a meaning behind the name. Now, what did Hannah do when she prayed? She desired for a child. Evelina means desire. Desire defines as a strong feeling of wanting to have something. God answered the desire of our hearts in prayer, just like He did for Hannah. And when Hannah dedicated Samuel back to the Lord, we read in verse 27 in the New King James Version, "For this child I prayed, and the Lord has granted me my petition which I asked of Him." We originally wanted to wait at least 6 months to dedicate Evie back to the Lord. But as the date came closer of her being born, we decided we're not waiting because it makes no sense how we got pregnant. It is all God. And we decided as parents that we wanted to recognize that, and that we recognize that this child is of God. And we wanted to dedicate her very quickly back to the Lord. So our story is very similar to Hannah's. We desired for a child, we prayed for a child, ultimately putting our complete trust in God like Hannah. God answered our desire. And I'm going to close with this. If you're struggling in an area in your life, whether it be trying to have a child, wanting a wife, wanting a husband, whatever it may be, the one thing that we want you to take away and learn from our testimony is that you need to find joy and happiness for other people, getting the thing you're desiring for, and you need to find joy in the journey, because it is the most rewarding thing that will come out of this. And for the longest time, we had no idea why we had to go through this. We didn't understand the purpose until Sunday. We got to pray for a couple down here. They're desiring for a child. The whole purpose that we went through was the testimony that came out of it, that we can share so other people can relate and so that their faith can rise and be strong in the Lord. There's nothing more rewarding than that. I would go through the last 4 years again to get that result. I don't regret it. I hated going through it. Looking back on it now, I thank you that you had me go through that. There is nothing that we could have done on our own and with help, because it wasn't working. We just had to ultimately put our faith and our trust in God and let Him take care of it. And we had to find happiness and joy for other people. And we found our joy in the journey. And if you're struggling here tonight with anything that I've just gotten done saying, put your 100% faith and trust in God, and He will take care of it.